Welcome back, Jordan. Thanks for joining my podcast again today.
Thanks for having me, Avery. I'm so happy to be here.
So, today we're talking a little bit about networking and also the difference between what you know versus who you know, and how those kind of things can be very important and how they can both help you out in the long run in succeeding and moving forward in your career or whatever path you're on. I do want to start by prefacing in this episode that the title might be a little bit misleading. I don't want you guys to think that you need connections to be successful. You do not need them, but they are very helpful. And there are a lot of people who are able to build amazing careers and amazing lives from little to no connections or experiences with others. So, this is in no way saying that you cannot do that, but it is definitely helpful and beneficial when you are able to make connections with people. And that doesn't only mean in a transactional way.
Well, Avery, I think that's a good point, but I think maybe what you're trying to say is that you don't need the connections to get you started.
Well, I think when it comes to excelling forward, obviously you're not going to be all alone out there. I think everyone has somebody, but I don't want to create the idea that you need to be like a Nepo baby in order to be successful.
Exactly. So you're saying you don't need connections to get, let's say, a job, to get started. To
Right.
get started, I mean, there's lots of tools you can use. Knowing people is just one of them, but lots of people, like you said, have gotten a position somewhere and they haven't like needed to know people in order to make, get that job. It didn't have to do with their connections. On the
Right.
other hand, I feel like usually once you're in a position, in order to excel, you need to have good connections and relationships with people, even if that means just having like building strong relationships with the people that you work directly with. Because you
Right.
need people to vouch for you when you're up for a promotion or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. Building connections as you go can be just as important as starting out with connections, if
Yeah,
not
I
more.
think more so.
This episode topic was a little bit inspired by the fact that you, Jordan, had this idea of this topic. And I thought it was a great topic to talk about, especially on this podcast where we really try to excel in careers. And although this is a type of topic that can go for any career, no matter what you're going for. But I want to ask you what made you think of this topic, and maybe start by letting you explain a little on how this like new perspective on connections and networking is helping your path through earning your PhD.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think about this phrase a lot because I I'm over doing my PhD. I'm in my little bubble, sitting at my desk, and I'm like working on my dissertation or whatever I'm doing. But every so often, and it happens way more often than you'd think, I need help from other people, whether that be like my peers, my boss, my like coworkers, or my even like my assistants, or sometimes other people in the industry that are like outside of my direct circle that I need to be able to like, send them an email and be like, hey, I met you at this conference last year and you might not remember me, but I need a favor, And then if they can remember you a little bit, like they might want to help you out.
Mhm.
Um, I remember the first time that I realized this like importance of making connections was literally having someone to call right in your back pocket when they needed help. So I was asking my supervisor for help with like an electrical problem in the lab. Literally an outlet was broken, right? And we needed an electrician. It was something that neither of us could fix on our own, but he knew an electrician that was like his buddy. So he just called him up and the guy came within an hour and fixed it for us. We didn't have to wait for an electrician to come and like pay them and whatever. It's just this guy's friend. So like obviously anybody can just, look online, call an electrician, but it's totally different to be in a situation where you need help and then you immediately know exactly who to call. Oh, I have a buddy who can help me out. And he already knows where my office building is. He's been here, he's familiar with like the layout, whatever. Not only do you know who to call, but they'll be willing to help you because you're part of each other's network.
Right. Not only can your supervisor call him up when he needs help, but I'm sure that whenever his friend, the electrician, needs any type of advice or help from your supervisor, he can also call him up just the same.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a give and take. And that's why I said they're in each other's network because really it's about everyone building a system and building a network. And in my mind, it's just like a bunch of circles where you're in the middle. But those circles are always
True.
overlapping, like a Venn diagram. That's how it
Yeah,
is in my head, but that's kind of a random image. But once you have somebody in your network and they're in your network, you guys are you can help each other out forever. So like, I work in this environment where people are there's a high turnover rate, like you're not there for 20 years working on your PhD. It's like 4 years and then you're kind of out. So I get to meet a lot of people like in my time there. I'm kind of like passing through and they get to meet me, and I'm always trying to make those connections with people and like introduce myself and make myself seen so that I can remember them and they can remember me in the future.
right. I really like your idea of your visual, honestly, of the Venn diagram or the circle kind of idea, because truthfully, that is what connections should be like. It shouldn't just be a line or an arrow, almost like I give to you, you don't give back. All connections and relationships are, I think, a give and take. And although maybe you're not in the relationship or for the number one reason of being transactional or to get something from that person, which I hope you're not, but so for that reason, you're kind of giving to the other person. You are giving them what you can provide as a friend or whatever acquaintance you are to them, and they are also giving back to you in just the same. I think that also stresses the importance of not just depending on others to give to you. You also have to be there to provide to what you have to other people. If you know of a connection that could help someone else out, that's your friend or your close acquaintance, you need to be there to help them out with your connection that they might not have. Connect your connection to them, and then later on, who knows, they could give you back the same generosity that you gave to them. And I think that's honestly how the best connections are built, by helping others out, not necessarily for the reason of doing it for something in return, but doing it because you also want to help people. Because if you care about this person, if it's your friend, then I hope that you want to help them. And it is likely that if you do that, they will also help you back when you need it.
Exactly. And that's the idea of always having these overlapping networks, and every you're growing your network and maybe yours is overlapping a little bit more into somebody else's and whatever. It's always the circle is always expanding.
Right.
And I think also like something that you just touched on about having things be transactional. I think like once you get into more of a professional environment, like I sometimes go to conferences where there's people who I work with and who like sometimes like I think if you listen to the episode that I last time I was talking about consulting in environmental engineering, so like
Mm-hmm.
if you go to a conference, there are consulting firms and then the clients that hire the consulting firms and they like work together. They're specifically professional acquaintances. But
Right.
then also, like at these conferences, there's a happy hour, and we're all just kind of like mingling and chatting and like being friendly, and that kind of helps you develop a little bit of a more social, personal relationship with
Right.
people
Right.
who are already in your same professional environments, right? So maybe that's kind of strengthening those relationships, and making it easier for you to be able to like call them up when you need, you have a question about their business or whatever, and oh, I know the perfect person who could answer this question. My friend I met at this conference, let's call him up. And then, you have that connection. And it's also somebody where, oh, if you're both going to the same conference, maybe you go out to dinner to just chat about your life. Um, and they don't have to necessarily be your best friend, but it's like, it's somebody who's in your circle and you both respect each other as humans, as people, and respect each other as, experts in a certain field to some capacity. And I think that's kind of what building these connections is all about. It's just like respecting people and like being
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah. And actually, that's leads me into my next kind of segment of this because I wanted to touch on where we can really get these connections because especially as undergrad college students or maybe college students doing their masters, whatever you are, even high schoolers, it may feel kind of weird to step into this new world of quote unquote networking and how scary that word may sound. And especially when you think, oh, does that mean I have to go to networking events or conferences maybe? But of course, as a 20-year-old, 21, 22, you're maybe not going to go step out into an actual networking event, especially if you don't have much career experience yet or job experience yet. So, where do you think college students can go and make these kind of connections in the networking field?
That's a good point. And I think it's easier than you'd think because if you are, like, let's say you're in your first year of college and you're thinking about, okay, I'm interested in, like, I'm just going to say environmental engineering because that's my field, right? I'm interested in environmental engineering. You start taking classes. Probably most of them are going to be like the basic, like chemistry and calculus and stuff. But when you start having those more niche classes that are tailored to your major, you'll realize that like you are in class with students and professors who are in your same field. And so that means you've already been able to identify your professor who teaches environmental engineering. You guys are like tangentially tied, you're in the same kind of like realm of like interest and like career trajectory at that point. So you can identify that that would be a good connection to make. Other students in your class who are in your major, those would also be good connections to make because I mean, I think at this point for me, like it was a little bit more challenging for me when I was in my undergrad because it was during COVID. So it was a little bit harder to like make connections with people, but I was able to like make connections with the other students in my class, and now I'm still here doing my PhD and they're at other consulting firms or working in the real world, and sometimes I have a question and I'm like, oh, I know this person went into this other direction and they can probably help me answer this question, and then if they come into town, we hang out, we get a drink or whatever. So the connections that you're making, even in your first couple semesters, you're going to continue those. I think another thing with like your professors and how it's important to have them in your network is that there's opportunities for research or like other clubs that like you might not know about but your professor might have access to. Even undergrads could even go to conferences if they're doing research or if they're in certain clubs. And now that I'm saying this, I'm also realizing it's so easy for me to just say, yeah, like network, like put yourself out there. But like, how do you actually do that, right? So, Avery, how, if you were in class and you see somebody like your professor and you're like, I want them in my network, how would you start that?
Yeah,
How would
you know what's funny is I actually, as you were talking about this, I started noticing all of the times when I have done this, and I still am, especially recently. As I am in my third year of undergrad now, I'm starting to prioritize going to class a little bit more, especially the classes that I will connect more with my postgraduate degree, and especially making more connections this year with people in my classes, whether that's the professor or the students in the class. So, one example, honestly, last semester is when I really started to do this. And that really just started out by Gen Chem 2. We were assigned like groups to work together every like once a week during class, to work on like worksheets with. So obviously that gives you the more of the opportunity when you're put into these groups, especially if it's mandatory, to build connections with these specific people in the group, like your classmates in that group specifically, which I did. But on top of that, I then invited this friend that I had made through this group to go to the office hours with me as well. So not only were we working together outside of class, but we were now also working together with the professor outside of class, which he then knew us after going a few times, even in a lecture hall with 250 students. Now this semester, for my anatomy 2 professor in particular, I also go to the exam review sessions that she holds, so, and also attending class almost every day. So she knows me now and she does know my name. But when it comes to kind of starting that initial networking or conversation with a classmate specifically, because I think with professors it's a little bit easier because, I mean, they are there to teach you. And if you just show up to the office hours, that's already you kind of saying, like, hey, let's talk, or hey, I need help on something. But for classmates, it's a little bit harder, I think, because there's so many of you guys, especially in lecture halls. And who knows which ones just want to go there and leave, who wants to talk, who wants to actually study outside of class, who cares about this class, who doesn't. It's kind of hard to tell. So something that I did this semester was when we did, in a lot of classes, especially labs or smaller classrooms, we'll do an icebreaker in the beginning of the class. So this semester we did an icebreaker activity, and we really just went around the room the first day and said our name. We said what we did over the winter break, and then we said our major, I think. I don't remember. But I remember specifically paying attention to the people, and I was paying attention to what everyone was said they did over their Christmas break, their winter break. And there was this one classmate of mine in the class that said he was doing a lot of physical therapy shadowing over the winter break. He said, yes, I'm a senior and I already applied. Well, I am someone who, if you guys don't know, I am planning on applying to PT school this upcoming summer. So I took that right away as, this is somebody I need to talk to, because this is somebody that has answers that I need and information that I would love to know, and just personal experience that's very recent as well.
Mhm.
So that was a long winded way to say, pay attention to what people say. And the biggest thing too is remind people that you remember what they said by going to someone and saying, oh, I remember you said that you did this during your winter break, and that was really cool. Like, let's talk more about that. They will really appreciate the fact that you listened, and it'll probably most of the time make them want to listen to what you have to say even more as well. to return the favor.
I think that's a great point because you're right that approaching your peers is sometimes more difficult than approaching a professor or an instructor. So that's a really good point. I was going to add to that. So that can be hard for people. Like I'm imagining, Avery, you're a little bit more extroverted than me. So my thing is like, okay, I can't afford to use that much energy, right? Because like it takes so much effort for me to like reach out to somebody and walk up to them and start talking to them. So here's what I would do as an introvert is still the same, like listen and like remember the information and remember people's names and faces. Then I would take it one step further and I would try and notice people who are in who have multiple things in common with you. So like maybe you're in two of the same classes, or maybe you're in one class in one club, or something like that. Or like your example, I feel like I also would have approached that person because that's like a really solid like thing that you guys had in common. People who are in other like health related fields who might not be in physical therapy. So like that's a
Right.
good place where you're like, oh, okay, this person is on the same like trajectory as me. And
Exactly.
so this is a good person to approach. So like my experience of that, especially if you're at a big university, is like you notice people who are in the same trajectory as you. They might be in like two of the same classes or whatever. Or like when I was in undergrad and I joined my lab group, I started talking to everybody who was in the lab group because again, it was like during COVID, so I didn't have as much opportunity in class, but I had a lot of opportunity in the lab to like talk with people. And then turns out we were in the same classes, but we just didn't know because they were all virtual, you know?
Yeah.
So when you have like multiple chances to bond with people, that I think that also helps you make those connections.
Yeah, that's true. One of the friends I made last semester actually, he was in two of my classes and we didn't even know it until we started talking outside of class about one of our classes, and we found out we were in the exact same class because they're both lectures with
Yeah.
over 100 students each. So it's hard to tell if you don't talk
So
sometimes.
I think before we get too far from it, I also want to go back to building connections with your professors. I think that's a really important thing, and it might be scary to like even go to office hours sometimes because that means you also have to like admit that you don't know something, and sometimes it can be one-on-one, which is like challenging to people. So I think your move with bringing a friend there was a really smart choice because now you got to have a friend with you to like make that first introduction with your professor, and now your professor knows both of you, which is good. I think another like a bare minimum, go to class, like bare minimum, show face, right? The
Right.
next step up would be like raise your hand and ask questions, because I know we've all been in a class where your professor's like, are there any questions? Crickets. If
Nobody.
you raise your hand and ask a question, your professor's gonna remember you, right?
Mhm.
Another thing is like you can go to them after class or before class and ask a question. That's more challenging in like the giant lecture halls because maybe like other students are trying to do that. But those are just opportunities to like have your professor see your face. You
Right.
can send them emails and then later follow up with them in person about the email so they can recognize your face and your name and like make that connection. Um, and then, yeah, also don't be afraid to ask them about their life, like ask them a little bit about their career. Because if they have a career or like they have made life choices that you're also thinking of making, like don't be afraid to ask them about that. And just, as a follow up when you're also talking about school stuff, like I think that's totally fair. And it's going to make them remember you to also share a little bit about yourself and your interests.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I think that that's something that seems so scary a lot, but If you guys know anything about my podcast, you can seriously just approach people, and people love to talk about their lives and their careers and things that they've learned and things that they've done, what they've studied, and all of that. And there's nothing special to it. A lot of people are very willing to talk about their experiences and help others learn from their experiences and also make the same improvements or steps towards achievements that they've made.
Right. I think another thing that you can do as an undergrad or as a master's student or PhD student is pay attention to the events going on in your department. So, for example, in my department at UF, one of the instructors puts on a lecture series or like a seminar series where every week they have a guest lecturer come in, and it's somebody in the field, in like our field of environmental engineering, but they're from a different university. So something like that is really like a good opportunity for you to go and learn something new, meet somebody who is in your field, but you might not see around campus, right? Because they're at a different university. I actually, this was like really serendipitous for me, but I applied for something at a university up in New York State. And the next week after I applied, I didn't even realize, but an instructor from that university was doing a lecture at my school. So I went to the lecture and I asked a question during, and then afterwards, nobody else went up to talk to her. So I went up to talk to her. It was a little bit scary because I had to go up to her and I was like, hey, but I ended up telling her that I applied for the program at her university, and she was like, okay, maybe I'll try and put in a good word for you, you know? So that's something where, like, if I hadn't gone to that, I don't know if that's actually going to make a difference in whether or not I get this opportunity, but that's a connection that I made regardless. And now I kind of have the idea in my mind that even if I don't get this opportunity to visit the school that I applied to, I made her, like, I met her in the area. Like,
Yeah.
I'll still have the opportunity to meet her again and then maybe like meet some of her students and make more connections that way. And like, it's not even like I went up to talk to her for many, many reasons. Like, the
Right.
fact that she works at the university that I'm interested in is just one of the reasons. It's a really good example. And honestly, all I did was say hi. Like, I just
Right.
introduced myself and it went from there, because
Yeah.
you can like introduce yourself to a person and then realize that like you both are interested in making a connection with each other.
Right. That's true. And honestly, I think a lot of times that is the case,
Yes. Yeah.
especially if it's like a classmate or whatever.
Right.
But now that we talked a little bit about how we can kind of make these connections, I did kind of want to go back to the title of this episode because I hear this kind of phrase a lot by people saying, like, oh, connections are all that matters, or like connections mean so much, and you can't even get anywhere without making connections and all these types of things.
Mhm.
So I do want to talk about what that really means.
Right. Well, I think we've kind of touched on it, because it's not that it means you need connections to like get anywhere, but we are social creatures, right? It also doesn't mean that you don't need to know anything. Like, I think to myself all the time, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think that's fair to an extent. But like, at some point you're trying to graduate, you're trying to get your degree, you got to know some things. But
Right.
then later on, like once you're at this point, it's who you know. It means at a certain point, building and maintaining those connections are going to be necessary. So here's an example: the idea of leadership, right? You've probably heard people say that you aren't a leader unless somebody is following you. And that makes sense. Well, people are not going to follow you unless they trust you and feel connected to you. So the who you know in this case is your followers. And that means like you can't just like be a dictator and be like a leader and not care about connecting with people, right? I think another good example is the supervisor calling his electrician friend. We can't all be our own electrician or chef or assistant or whatever. You need to have people in your network who you can rely on to fill in those gaps that you can't.
Mhm.
So you can't do everything, even though we would hope that we would be able to do everything. There's always going to be something that we struggle with. I truly believe that the best way to succeed is to fill your network with people who have complementary skill sets.
Right. So when it comes to this idea of network being the ideal situation of having complementary skill sets, do you think that this idea, as well as maybe the leadership kind of idea, have been true for your experiences in school so far?
Yes. Well, first, let me say that in my current position, I feel like I am a leader and like a mentor because, like I explained in a previous episode, I work in a lab where I have assistants who are undergrads, right? So they're like undergraduate researchers. And I do my best to connect with them as people because we're all people and like we're all on this journey. So like why not also be nice to each other and like get to know each
Yeah.
other? And like every day they come in and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? How was your exam?" or whatever. And I also like I teach them what I know, but I also learn from them and I learn their strengths and I give them tasks that serve those strengths. That's kind of how they fill that gap in my skill set, if that makes
Sure.
sense. And, you know, sometimes, like, even though the undergraduates are like very new to the field or new to lab work, they might like literally have a skill that I don't have. Like, one of my undergrads is really good at like tinkering, like fixing things. So if one of our tools breaks, he's like, "Oh, I'm on it."
Mhm.
Also, I mean, this is like kind of embarrassing for me, but like I'm a woman, sometimes I can't lift things. Not just because I'm a woman,
Fair.
but I'm like small. So like sometimes I need people to help me lift stuff. And like that's a skill that I don't have. I can't like put the heavy things on the highest shelf or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think also in like a broader sense with um, you know, having like building these connections. And I think that definitely has been true in my experience, like going to conferences and things like that. And I like I said, going up to that person in the lecture, like I have met people and it has worked out. And I think that works for me because I try and be authentically myself and form connections with these people who run in the same circles as me. And to me, like I said, like going up to somebody after their lecture and just introducing myself at like big events like conferences, attending these seminars and guest lectures, and then staying late to ask questions, introduce myself to the speaker. It sometimes means that you need to be loud in a quiet room, even when it's uncomfortable, especially like if you're somebody who is smaller or if you're somebody who's maybe not taken as seriously in your field. Like, I mean, I could go on and on about that, but you know that you belong there and you need to make sure that other people trust that you know that you belong there because you know you belong there, right? So we're trying to build these connections and you're at these big events. Take up space, both literally and metaphorically. Walk right up to people and talk to them. Don't wait for people to come to you, right? Because they might not. If you're like a student going to one of these lectures, you'd be surprised. Sometimes people really want to talk to students and sometimes they don't. So just go up to them. Like whether you're in a social or professional setting, go up to people, ask them about their work, but then also talk about non-work related topics and find a common interest to bond over. Like
Mhm.
ask them questions and then genuinely listen for the answer. Be
Right.
nice to people, make them feel heard, and they'll probably remember you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm I'm a big supporter and I like to always say that the best connections are made through bringing back up those little things that you remember about them. The things that they told you, maybe you guys started talking about your personal lives, and you remember certain things about maybe they have kids, or maybe this hobby they just picked up, or some other little side thing that they do. You never know what that might mean to them that you remember that. And like I said earlier, it usually makes them want to listen more and remember more aspects about you as well, to return the favor of remembering those little things about them.
I agree. Exactly. Avery, I think we've talked a lot about building a network, but what about maintaining those connections?
Well, I think to start, like I kind of mentioned, staying in touch is a big one. Um, But I don't think it needs to be forced. I think staying in touch can just mean following up. Maybe there was something in the near future that this person told you that about, or that they were going to do. Or even like you said, when your undergraduate assistants come in, maybe you remember something that they had coming up. You ask them about an exam, little things like that, but also following up and reaching out. Maybe there's something that this person told you they were going to attend. Maybe you ask them how it was, or maybe you're going to attend it as well. You ask about if they're still going, little things like that. Because sometimes, honestly, keeping connections can feel a little bit forced. So it is, that can be a struggle to try to maintain them casually and
Yeah,
not forced.
I think it's also if these people are in the same circles as you, like moving forward in your career, you will continue to have opportunities to follow up with them and check in. Like there might be like a regional conference that happens once a year, and maybe you only like text or email a couple times in between those conferences, but you'll keep seeing them. And again, this is like looking ahead, because if you're in college, you're not going to these events yet. If you're in college, it's important that you build these connections even if they're not going to last that long. Like you don't know how long you're going to be in the same classes as this person, but if you know that there's somebody that you want to keep in touch with and you think you both would benefit from, like staying connected, then you have to put in the effort to like maintain that relationship.
Right.
And I agree
Yeah.
that that can feel forced, but yeah, it's about just like, okay, like bare minimum, easiest thing you can do, know their birthday and put it in your phone and like save it as their contact so that you text them on their birthday, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
easy.
Yeah,
Even
definitely.
if you don't have anything else to text them about, it's like, oh, this person that I was in class with last year, it's their birthday coming up. And then maybe they'll be like, oh, thanks. And you can be like, how have you been? Like, start it.
Right.
Just like go for it.
Yeah. This is also important because you don't want to be that person who only reaches out when they need something. And you want to be available for them to reach out to you as well. And for them to know that they can also come to you if they need something. You might think that you don't have anything to offer to them, because if it's maybe someone that's further along in their career than you, you might think that they just have things to offer to you and you don't really have much to offer to them. But you could be wrong, and maybe further down the line need your advice on something, they could need your help with something. You never really know. So I think reaching out when you, honestly, when you just think of them,
Yeah.
is important. And it can even be just like you said, something simple like their birthday, or even if you think of them, you can just say, if you're close enough, I guess, you could just say, "Hey, thinking of you, hope you're doing well in this kind of job, this career, or with this thing that happened in your life recently. Any updates, checking in, whatever." Because it's important, like I said, you don't want to just reach out when you need something. And people really catch on to that fast. They'll notice and they won't want to help you.
I completely agree. Yeah. I think another thing you can do, and this is important because if you are in somebody's, like, I think of it as a network, right? Like a mentorship network. But you can also think of it as like a support network, a support system, or like whatever. But if you're in somebody's network, you care if they win or lose. Like you care if they succeed. And I'm thinking right now about like how on LinkedIn you can post when you like get a new internship or you like published something or you presented at a conference or whatever. Like tell your people when you succeed. Like tell them, hey, I just got this internship. Like,
Right.
hey, I want to share this with you because you're part of the reason that I'm here. Like, you
Mhm.
don't have to say all of that, but that's the truth. Like, tell them when you succeed. And then, like, that's another way to kind of like keep that connection. So,
Yeah.
posting on LinkedIn is a good idea. Like, make sure you're literally like connections on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. Like, make sure you have those people in your circle. And so they can see when you make those, you know, when you have those successes. But also just texting them and being like, hey, look at this, like look at my degree, I graduated, or whatever it is.
Right.
Because people will be excited for you, and you want to be there to be excited for them too.
Exactly. So, some final thoughts to wrap up because I think we've gone through a lot. Basically, I want to stress that it's really not always about having like a huge network. Sometimes having, like you said, complementary skill sets is more important than having a bunch of people that all do the same thing and all know the same people and that kind of thing. I also want to stress that everyone starts somewhere. And if you feel like you have no connections right now, you definitely know someone. And if you haven't reached out to them recently, maybe think about doing that right now. Reach out, check in, see how they're doing, keep them in your network or your circle, as you want to, however you want to call it. And if you just keep doing that, your network will grow. It's just a slow type of thing. And as long as you keep consistent with building and maintaining these kind of relationships with people and remembering the important things about them and being there to help them when they need you as well, you'll be able to grow a really great network around you.
Very well said. I agree.
While we were talking, I kind of remembered this thing that I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind, especially when I meet people or I start a new job or whatever it may be. And it's something that our mom said to us when we were a kid. And it's something that I've kept with me because I think it's really important. And that is always be nice and respect people even if you do not like them, because who knows if they could be your boss one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows what could happen. So that's something that I encourage you guys to hold with you as I have. But that was just a little side note that I wanted to add there. But going back to our overall message today, another thing I would like to stress, not only does everyone start somewhere, but if you feel like all your colleagues, people around you that are the same age as you are already ahead, maybe in some kind of aspect of having a network or some kind of circle, I want to remind you that you're also not behind if you don't have connections yet.
Yeah. And I don't think it's really possible for you to not have any connections because if you know a person, that's a connection. That person probably knows another person. And maybe there's somebody that you used to know that you could reach back out to and bring back into your network and continue to foster and build and maintain that relationship with them. Something to think about.
Exactly.
I think, Avery, in summary, we've talked a lot about building and maintaining relationships in a professional kind of way.
Yeah, so that about sums up today's episode. I want to leave you guys with this. Maybe it's not about knowing the right people, but Maybe it's about becoming someone that people want to stay connected to. That concludes today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today again, Jordan. I'll probably have you on the podcast again, but thank you for talking about networks today with me.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Avery.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening today. Tune in every Thursday to listen or watch on YouTube and Spotify, or just audio only on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Audible. Make sure to check out the Instagram or the TikTok at findyourpower_podcast. And thank you guys again so much for tuning in and listening. If you guys enjoy the podcast, please rate it 5 stars on anywhere that you stream. Leave any comments or reviews. And subscribe to the YouTube channel as well if you do watch on there. And lastly, if you'd like to be featured for an interview or a conversation like this one, you can send me an email at the email linked in the podcast description section, or shoot me a DM on the Instagram. I will talk to you guys again soon, next Thursday, and don't forget, we will find your power.